In today's episode, author Jason Shurka shares with us insights from his encounters with the light system, TLS, his own personal experiences, as well as wisdom from his published books. Join us as we discuss what it means to move into the age of love, how our thoughts are the bridge between the worlds of form and the formless, what we can do to support the process of ascension, and so much more. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to our show. And as we continue on with Science, Mysticism, and Beyond with Jason Shurka, and I'm really excited to have Jason on the show today. We first came across his work with Lori Ladd. So my wife and I were watching a Lori Ladd episode, and then they ended up connecting, and then they started to do some global meditations together. And Tay and I had taken part in some of their global meditations, and really liked the work that they were putting out. I think it was really supporting a lot of people during the craziness of 2020, and still on today. And so I started to look into some of his work, and this guy powered through writing 3 different books in 2020. I mean, he was on a mission and really managed to get his message out really well. And I read his books and really liked them. And some of his books were Forming the Formless, The Language of Energy, and then his most recent one, Rays of Knowledge. And I really liked the messages that he had in all of his books. And they're worded very well, they're easy to read, and they really do bring a lot of important information to light that I think will help people navigate their life in a way that helps to create more meaning and also allows them in a place where they can start to really create the life that they would like to create. There's a lot of different books out there talking about some of these concepts, but I think Jason really dialed in a lot of the really most important concepts and brings it to people in a very user-friendly way that's very readable. Now, normally we have live events with most of our guests planned. Now, there's some that can't make it, and Jason unfortunately isn't able to make the live event that we usually do within the week after his episode. But we are getting in substitution for him is we're going to have another live event with Huna Flash. So if you haven't checked out Huna Flash's episode, check it out. We also did a live with Huna Flash. He's a really remarkable guy, and Tay and I have actually followed some of his work, and we did the seal ceremony with him, which was really quite amazing. And then we actually signed up and did this, and we are doing his navigator's course because I find his information really unique, and I feel like he comes from such a place of love and care. And so we really do like his work and his message and just who he is, and we wanted to learn more about the kind of stuff he's doing. So in the live events, what you can do is you can post questions for us. When you see the clip on YouTube, or when we post it up on any of the social media platforms, start writing questions. If you have questions, you can start to post them, and we will compile the questions to ask the guests during the live. So Huna Flash will be live with us on Sunday, February 7th at 11 a.m. Pacific time, 2 p.m. Eastern time. So join us at that. And then during the time, you can also write in questions during the live, and we will pose them to Huna at that time too. So any questions that are coming up around any of this content that you've been digesting, feel free to ask questions, and Huna will answer them as best as he can for you. Now, the other thing that I'm really excited to bring awareness to people is that we are also going to be doing a couple of roundtable discussions where we are bringing a bunch of the different guests, different parts of the series together to have a big roundtable discussion. So the first one that's coming up is February 15th, and that's going to be at 8 a.m. Pacific time or 11 a.m. Eastern time. And at that roundtable, we're going to have Jason Shurka, Huna Flash, Dr. Christiane Northrup, Magenta Pixie, and Marilyn Harper. So we're going to have 5 of these amazing guests. And again, send questions in. We're going to get updates from all of them as far as where we're going, what's going on. And we're going to answer some of the questions that Tay and I have, as well as any questions that you guys start to post. So again, when we put up the advertisement for that on YouTube, so go to the YouTube channel at Dr. Jason Loken ND, and you will see us there. And when you see the YouTube video go up, for the roundtable discussion or on Facebook or Instagram, just make sure you start posting questions. And then the more questions that we get, we'll compile those, and then we'll start to field them. And whether it's a question you want for the whole group, or if there's a specific person you want to ask a question to, just make note of it so we can compile them. But these are going to be really fun events. So I'm really looking forward to sharing the information from all of these panelists. I also want to give a shout out to EMF Harmonize for sponsoring this series. Their mitigating technology for EMF and 5G exposure is really phenomenal. We use it on all of our products. And I was just looking at an article again on Healthline around symptoms of EMF. And I have seen this often in clinic. And like I said, a lot of people that are sensitive to EMF are like that. They're like that canary in the coal mine. A lot of times, certain people are very, very sensitive to EMF that a lot of times other people might not quite know is going on. But at the same time, there are changes happening in the body. Some people just pick up on it a lot faster. But symptoms for EMF exposure can be really broad spectrum. I think of it like when I see someone with like adrenal fatigue or candidiasis or these types of symptoms where you can have these types of conditions where you can have a whole array of symptoms that really overlaps. And often you're finding nothing showing up when you're going to get some standard medical procedures done, or you're getting your routine blood work and nothing showing up. And this is exactly when we talk about, they tell you everything is normal, but you still don't feel normal. When you still don't feel normal, you have to take a deeper dive. You've got to look into the other pieces. EMF exposure is one of those potential things that can be really detrimental for people. So think about this: when you get symptoms along these, EMF exposure could be at the root of it. And when you're using a really powerful EMF mitigating technology like EMF Harmonized has, you might find that that might be the difference between these symptoms taking over your life or these symptoms starting to just dissipate. So things like sleep disturbances, insomnia, headaches, depression and depressive symptoms, tiredness, fatigue, itchy sensations, lack of concentration, changes in memory, dizziness, irritability, loss of appetite or weight loss, restlessness and anxiety, nausea, skin burning and tingling, and many others. But these are some of the big ones. So if you've got any of those symptoms and you've assessed things and you've had it checked out and you still haven't seen or come to an answer, start to look into EMF. The first thing you might look at doing is just shutting off your router completely for a few days, or at least overnight, and seeing if symptoms change. Looking at getting the EMF harmonized mitigating technology can be another possible solution. And EMF Harmonize offers 10% off to all listeners to the Inspire Health podcast. So click the link in the show notes here, or go to the website and you will see the link for EMF Harmonize. Just click it, go to the website. Anything that you purchase, when you hit proceed to checkout, you will see the 10% discount. All right, everybody, stay tuned and get ready for Jason Shurka's episode. I'll talk to you guys soon. Bye-bye.
Welcome to the Inspire Health podcast. Your life is about to get a whole lot better. Have you ever felt like you tried everything and yet still couldn't find the answers or the solutions that you were seeking? Whether you're dealing with chronic illness, physical or emotional pain, I want you to know that your body is the most sophisticated machine on planet Earth. Your body holds unfathomable wisdom. Trust in it and learn from it. Know that there are answers and there are solutions to your specific health challenges. And we will be uncovering all of them here on the Inspire Health podcast. I'm so excited to be a part of your healing journey. Your transformation starts now.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Inspire Health podcast and to our series on science, mysticism, and beyond, humanity's next phase of evolution. I'm really excited to have our guest, Jason Shurka, with us today. I've been following Jason's work for the last several months, and I think it's brilliant. So I'm super happy to have him on the show. Now, day to day, Jason is the vice president of an international commercial real estate firm based out of New York City. And in his hobby, he happens to write several books and publishes them. So recently, he's published his first book on spirituality called Forming the Formless, and that was done in the beginning of 2020. He published his second book, The Language of Energy, in September 2020, and recently just completed his third book, Rays of Knowledge, which focuses on the importance of awareness in order to make a positive shift for humanity. In his free time, he enjoys helping others by training the mind to clear emotional and physical blockages, as he feels that our destiny here on earth is to shine the light of presence and love onto others, and thus expand the light of others to shine onto the rest of humanity. I think that's beautiful, Jason. What a pleasure having you on the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
So I know you just got back recently from, you just finished writing your third book. So I think you were out in Mexico for a while, probably getting that stuff all done.
That's right.
Oh, beautiful. Yeah, there it is.
Word version.
Feels nice to hold that up once it's done, eh?
Yeah. No, this one was really incredible. The writing of it. Usually when I write, it's not a very logical process. It's not so much to do with the mind. It's just something opens up in my system energetically, and there's this flow of if you want to call it a download, I definitely feel guided when it happens. This book specifically started on 11/11 just a few days ago, and it took 18 days to complete this one. The language of energy also happened in about 11 days, if I'm not mistaken. So it's that's usually how they happen. The difference between Rays of Knowledge and the other books is the other books is more of explaining certain things that I've been taught. Rays of Knowledge is the first time that I was able to speak about experiences that I wasn't allowed to speak about for some time, having to do with TLS and a bunch of other things. And I was also allowed to bring excerpts from other books that have not been published yet and will probably not be published for some time.
Oh, I'm
So
excited
it's
to read it.
kind of exciting. Yeah, it's going to be exciting.
Well, and it sounds like to me, if you're hammering through a book in about 11 days, then you're pretty much downloading that information. There's some divine guidance in that process when you can get a book this thick and get it down into about 11 days.
No,
Jason,
it's amazing because it's just, you could feel it, it's
Mhm.
not, it doesn't take effort because I'm not the one writing it. It's just coming through. So no, I'm very
Yeah.
grateful and appreciative to be able to experience that and be the medium through which that flows.
Nice. Well, I often think too, like when that divine guidance comes in, to me, it feels like the difference between almost motivation and inspiration. It's like you can almost motivate yourself to push the rock up the mountain really hard, but when you get inspired like that and somebody else is sort of helping you, it's like you're getting drawn up the mountain. You're not having to work so hard. It's almost like you can't do anything but do it, and because there's excitement to do it. So there's this work sort of feeling is different. It doesn't feel like work. It feels inspired action.
Absolutely.
Jason, can you tell us a little bit about your journey here? Because, I mean, vice president day to day, it's like you got a day to day job, but really you are on the cutting edge of helping humanity move into this next phase of evolution. Where did those worlds blend?
Where do those worlds blend? Well, let's start with the fact that I'm just a normal guy like everybody else. I work, I have a job, I got to support myself. I live like everybody else lives. Um, Real estate is just something I was pretty much raised into. It's a family business that I was brought into. It's something that I like to do. It's not a passion that I wake up every morning and I can't wait to go and write a contract. That's not how it is for me. But the reason why I enjoy it so much is because it gives me the ability to do everything else that I do want to do. And I do have a passion for doing. And I really feel that's why I'm here on earth today. So that's my job. I now have a lot of new things have been happening recently where, with the books and certain films that I've put out and new content that I'm putting out and new information that I'm being given permission to reveal, a lot of these things cost money. At the end of the day, publishing a book, it costs
Mhm.
money. Putting together a film costs money. All of these things cost money. So I actually decided a few days ago to start a Patreon community with the intention of having people come together to help fund this initiative so we can do it all together and have new conscious content and have new things come out that cost money. Ultimately, there's this thing when it comes to money, by the way, that I do want to put out there where people have this idea of it's not good to make money if you're doing something good. And I disagree with that. Money is energy. That's all it is. It's a flow of energy. And when you're giving energy, you're entitled to receive energy. And that's the flow. That's how things work.
Yeah.
So where they mix in terms of my day-to-day job and what I'm doing today, one gives me the ability to do the other. And I wouldn't be able to be where I am today if it wasn't for the real estate aspect of my life that keeps me afloat.
Mm-hmm. And I couldn't agree with you more. I think ultimately when people get caught up on the idea of money, I think most of the time it's an opportunity for us to kind of relook at where those programs got embedded in the first place. And again, like just think what more could you do with money from a positive intent? Like it's just another vehicle to do more stuff, right?
Now, some can use it for other stuff, and that's where it can get a little corrupt, if you want to call it.
Mhm.
So my intent has always been aligned with everything I do. For the most part, is for all of us. It's not for me. I'm not going and buying a car or a jet ski. I'm going and putting that money towards You
Publishing
know,
books, making
yeah,
courses.
up until now, I've taken it out of my pocket, which is fine. But the ideas that I have that are coming, it takes a lot more than just a few $1,000s to make those happen. So
Yeah, no,
that's
absolutely.
where I'm going to start that initiative of people coming together, and let's put our energy, instead of calling it money, our energy together to bring something to life.
Nice. And we'll put the links for Patreon at the end here too, just so people can
Sure.
check that out as well.
Sure. Thank you.
Where did it start to become such a spiritual journey for you, though? Where did this transition happen where you really started to get, I mean, really awakened by this concept of shifting in humanity, this conscious shift that's happening in humanity? Where did that start to really awaken inside you?
It's a good question. So I explain this, by the way, in Forming the Formless, where I give my first book, where I give an idea of how my life sort of started and what happened. So I'll do that in a few sentences here. I was considered an outcast as a child. So I asked questions that most people didn't ask. I was interested in things that most people didn't care about. It could be high technology, extraterrestrial life, mysticism behind structures and their numerology, the stars, space, all of these things. And as a young kid, like 5, 6, 7 years old, it was all good because I was just a young kid. It was okay. But as I started getting older and people started understanding, especially my friends at the time, at like 9 years old, 10 years old, 11 years old, started understanding what I was asking, they looked at me like, what's wrong with you? And it even got to points where I remember my grandfather passed away when I was 9 years old. And he had Alzheimer's, he was suffering. So the day I found out that he passed away, I wasn't really upset. My instinct was, that's amazing. That's good for him. He no longer has to suffer.
Mm-hmm.
And I was criticized for that by people around me. So as a kid, being criticized for things like that, naturally, subconsciously, I changed as a defense mechanism because I didn't want to be weird. I didn't want to be an outcast.
Yeah. Or be judged by others.
Exactly. So I put on a mask, and that mask lasted pretty long until a lot of things started happening. I dislocated my shoulder 23 times. I almost had to get a mechanical shoulder. I got a bunch of surgery on this shoulder. I almost lost my leg from a staph infection I got in Thailand. And thing after thing after thing kept happening to me. And there was one common theme between all of those injuries that happened for pretty much a period of 4 years, from 2014 to 2018. And that from 2011 to 2015. The common theme between all these injuries was they kept forcing me to be in a state of isolation. It's not like I shattered a finger and I could still go to dinner with friends. I was in bed by myself, sometimes in the hospital for not too short periods of times, especially when I hurt my leg. And I would say I was almost forced into this place of just self-reflection. Look what's going on around you. I remember waking up one morning in the hospital, and it was the first time I could hear my heartbeat without trying to listen to anything else. That's how silent everything was. And I just started having questions. Certain things started arising in my mind. What's the silence in between each beat? Because really that's what makes the beat happen in the first place. And that led me to other places. And when things really took off was when I was approached by a specific individual who is very responsible for everything that's happening today in my life now and the information that's coming out. So in 2018, in June of 2018, I was approached by a stranger at the time who, I like your necklace. What's your name? How are you? Starting conversation. And one thing led to another. I later understood that man was not a stranger, and there was a plan behind that, which I'll explain. And it turns out that over time, there was this disclosure process that I was being put through without even understanding what I was being put through. But that process was what brought me back to that child that I was before I put on that mask. And it was the sharing of some incredible information, experiences that I had, experiences that were shared. And over time, it eventually came to the point where this man, who in Rays of Knowledge I referred to as George because he does not want his identity to be revealed at the time, so his pseudonym is George. George ended up revealing his affiliation with an organization known as TLS. And TLS is known as the Light System, which is no less than a divine organization. They've been around for thousands of years. You can think about them as the equivalent of like the spiritual CIA, because they work in pretty much the same way, and their missions, what they do, their structure. The only difference I would say is their intention, because their intention of existing in the first place is to help assist and guide humanity in reaching a higher level of awareness, and therefore changing the reality that we experience. Because ultimately, the reality that we experience is a reflection of the resonance or awareness that we're in. So that's what brought me to what's going on now, and ultimately this podcast.
Oh, I love it. And I know sometimes that people might think like, what do you mean you were approached by some other people, or what does that look like? And I mean, I've never really talked to too many people about this before either, but myself and my co-author to the book that we wrote, The Letters That Move the World, we were actually approached by people around the same time over a decade ago. And I don't know if it was from the same group. They were through a group called Insight. And there was a few different people, and it was basically about a 2-year process of doing a lot of different types of exercises and works and journaling. And it challenged almost all of our core beliefs again and really stripped a lot of this stuff down to get back to the essence of who we were. And it was probably still one of the most profound experiences I've had. Now, since then, the main teacher that we had, she passed away, but myself and my co-authors still kind of work on some of this stuff back and forth. But it was basically, it lit a spark. It was a spark that kind of started a certain transformation inside of both of us. And I mean, I feel like at the time I remember thinking like I had no idea what was going on. It felt like I was kind of going into a whole different world around stuff, and started to wonder if I was losing my mind a little bit at times. And but it's like it really just kept resonating at a certain level of truth for me. And so that just kind of was the feeling that just kept me going. If it even when stuff was coming up, that just seemed like, what is going on? It felt like the world was being shifted upside down. So I think I resonate in aspects of what you've kind of gone through, and I can totally appreciate it. And I know how much courage it even takes to kind of actually stay the course on stuff like that too.
Yeah, you lose friends, you gain friends,
Yeah.
you lose family. Not, I didn't lose family, but I did. Some relationships diminished over time because some think I belong in a mental asylum.
Well, it changes for sure. And I remember at one point even saying to my friend at the time who was doing a lot of the work, and I said, like, how does this work? Like, this is supposed to be expansive, but I feel like I'm actually losing. Does it mean I never have a relationship again because it doesn't resonate? But it was just a lot of clearing of what didn't work. And she said, just stay the course. She goes, trust me, when it expands, it expands. And that's a core feeling to me when I think about truth. Is it's this feeling of, does it actually start to expand and feel expansive in my life and make my life bigger? Or does it start to feel restrictive, and does it feel like I'm closing up and I'm not able to share who I really am? And so I really resonate with your story when I was reading it, which made me also want to reach out to you, because I think I understand to some points about what that could have been like. Jason, I want to talk a little bit about your books here too, but before we get into that, from your perspective, what is 2020 about? Because depending on where you are focusing your attention, you're going to get some very different concepts of what's going on. I mean, people are thinking this is Armageddon, the world is finishing as we know it. Other people are thinking, great, the new world's going to be starting in a way that we can consciously create it. Other people are just hoping to get back to normal. I mean, if we can kind of climb up the mountain a little bit and look at a larger vista of possibilities of what might be going on, can you share with us your thoughts on that?
Sure. I'll keep it as simple as possible. On the level of an individual, forget the collective and our collective experience. When does somebody make a drastic change in their life? And from my experience, the answer to that question is when they hit rock bottom. right? Usually those big shifts
Mhm.
change, those big shifts happen when somebody hits such a low that they have no room to go lower. There's only upwards from there. What we're experiencing, in my opinion, in this year and probably a few years to come, I don't think it's coming to an end very soon. But what we're experiencing, I think, is that shift and that rock bottom, but no longer on just the individual level, on the collective level. Now, what makes up the collective? The collective is made up by individuals in the first place. So when I say collective, I mean all of us are impacted by what's going on now in one way or another, whether it's financially, whether it's emotionally. It could be any way. We're all being impacted. And you could see that impact as a bad thing when you're actually in the river without seeing where the river leads to. Or you can zoom out and understand that every river starts at a mountaintop and ends in an ocean. So there is an ocean that we're leading to here. And what we're experiencing right now, in my opinion, is the collective shift. It's no longer individual shifts happening at different times. We're collectively experiencing something that will, just by the laws of energy and the universe and how things work, lead us to a beautiful place.
Well, and I think in the Pyramid Code, one of the other books that you published, we can talk about a little bit down the road here, but I think it also mentions that we are currently in an age of light and that we are moving into an age of love. And it sounds like the speed at which we move into the age of love directly relates to us as a humanity right at the moment. And I'd love to hear your words around that too, as far as what is going on with that, and then what can we do to facilitate that timeline to showing up a little bit sooner rather than maybe decades and decades down the road? Can we bring it into age of love sooner than we would like to?
Yes. So, first of all, the age of light, according to the information that I've been given from TLS, is it started in 2012, December 21st, 2012, that day that they said the world is going to end because the whole Mayan calendar and all that. What really happened on that day was an energetic shift. It could do maybe with the cosmos, stars, and all of that. I'm not an expert when it comes to that, but the age of light started on December 21st, 2012. Now, ever since, if you look around you, food has been changing. What's in mainstream media has been changing. Mainstream interests have been changing. We see yoga as more mainstream. Meditation is more mainstream.
Mm-hmm.
Eating vegan is more mainstream. And for anybody that doesn't see that, just look at the one thing that we can all share. Look at the stock market. There are companies worth hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars, that are focused on plant-based foods. That the fact that a company like that exists and has such a high market cap shows that there's a demand. Otherwise, that company wouldn't exist. And if there's a demand, the demand is reflective of our shift in consciousness. So it's there.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the age of light is, think of it as like the bridge to the age of love. It's when information is exposed, when suddenly we see certain things that we didn't see before. It's also, in short and simplistically, a way and a bridge that we're crossing that will help us raise our level of awareness. And the reason why that's so important is because ultimately reality is a reflection of what we're in resonance with on the energetic level. So let's say there's 10 dimensions. Right now, let's say we're in dimension 3, level 3 of dimensional awareness. There are things that exist in 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. But so long as we're in 3, we will not be able to see what's in 4 or 5 or 6 because we're not in resonance with that awareness. So the purpose of the age of light and the purpose of a big intention behind TLS and that organization as a whole is to raise our level of awareness to what they call 5th dimensional awareness. And 5th dimensional awareness is, I'll give that a lot's going on in my head right now, is pretty much what correlates to what they call the age of love. So in order to reach the age of love, we have to reach 5th dimensional awareness on the collective level. There are people that are in 5th dimensional awareness today and higher. but we have to reach that as us, as we. And when I say we, I'm not talking about the human race. We're talking about all life in the universe. And there is other life in the universe. Some of them look like us, some of them don't. Some of them act like us, some of them don't. We have to come here collectively as a whole. It's not just Earth, it's all of us. So in order to get there, and that's part of the things that I cover in Forming a Formless, in the language of energy, and more directly in Rays of Knowledge and the Pyramid Code, is step one, we have to be aware that this exists, right? If you're not aware that you have wings, you won't know that you can fly. So the awareness is step one. That's where it all starts. And in order to become aware, knowledge is what must be regained. And knowledge has been suppressed from us for a very, very long time in all aspects of reality. You know, in all centuries that we've lived through, there's been, whether it's a specific group of human beings or certain people have been suppressing our knowledge and stopping us from realizing that. Now, just one thing I want to add, they're not the people to blame. They simply exist because that exists in the resonance of awareness that we exist in today. So people always say, well, you're saying the age of love is this new world with no borders and no wars and no toxins and no drugs and no vaccines and no doctors and no lawyers, because we won't need those things, because we will live in a state of harmony. So you won't need something to fix a problem because those won't exist. So no evil, no corruption, no greed. And I'm faced with a common question or comment. And people usually say, well, that's just a part of human nature. There's always going to be evil in the world. And I couldn't have been, I'll tell you why I don't agree with that. I don't agree with that because I don't think on the energetic level that evil exists as a part of us. I think we simply experience evil because we're in the channel or in the resonance where evil exists. And there is an ability to transcend our level of awareness, to transcend the limitations that we have now, to transcend third dimensional awareness that we're existing here and now. And when we do that, we're no longer going to be in a channel that has evil, that has greed, because all of those are frequencies. And if you change the channel, you hear different things, you experience different things. So there are many ways to get to that new age. It can be through our food, through our awareness, through our knowledge, through the actions that we do, through the words that we express, through the thoughts that we think. It's all boiled down to the understanding and the knowledge that everything is a frequency. Everything is an energy, whether it's your music, your art, your food, your words, your thoughts, your friends. And when you shift all of those, your reality will shift, therefore bringing us into that new age called the age of love. And we could bring it in our.
Yeah, so we'll get to that in just a sec then. So, and I totally agree with you. I don't feel like evil is an inherent part of us if we are, how it was explained once to me that made sense was that when there's only divinity, there's only sort of source, and you're either connected to source or the evil comes when you're just not connected to source. It's sort of like the idea of light and dark. There's not really dark. Dark is just an absence of light. So if you are connecting to divinity or connecting to source, then that evil doesn't really exist within there. But if you are separated from it and that separation happens, then you're not privy to the influence of it in the same way. So then evil can start to manifest, but is more of it's not coming from the original source place anymore.
Okay, so I want to add something to what you just said, and this is something that was reiterated to me when I read recently a portion of Rays of Light when I was writing Rays of Knowledge. There is no such thing as not being connected to source. Mm-hmm. We are source. The only thing we can be disconnected from is the awareness and the knowledge that we are source.
Correct. Yeah.
When we lose that awareness, it might seem that we're disconnected from source, but you can't be disconnected from source because there's no external source that exists. We are a source. That's what we are. That's what we always have been, always what we will be. So I just wanted to reframe that
Yeah.
from certain things that I've taught, because if we ever imply that source is something external of us, we live in the illusion of division, which is not fifth dimensional awareness. It's not fifth dimensional reality. So I just want to again reiterate that we are source, we are that, and the only thing that can make evil exist in the first place is the loss of awareness or the forgetting process that that's who we truly are.
Mm-hmm. No, I totally agree with you. It would be more like the illusion that we are separate.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
that's the illusion of separation, division. It doesn't exist.
Right. So then for probably the most important parts then for people on an individual level, as far as what they can do to sort of facilitate this shift, and not even if it's not about facilitating this global shift, but just how do they start to improve the quality of their own life? These things are really fundamental in a lot of ways, and by improving the quality of your own life in these ways, often you do start to connect to different things, and you do raise the level anyways. So this comes down to some of the information is in your book, in both of your books, but in forming the formless, that's a really important concept. So because this is really what allows people to start to be conscious creators of their own life. Because I feel like a lot of times we think that we are just an experiment going on with what happens with the external world, and that we are often victims to what happens in circumstances. And it brings in this concept of this internal world and this external world, and where is the locus of control for our life, versus when are we going to constantly be in a cycle of suffering if we're always focusing on the external world rather than inside. And I wonder if you can talk a little bit about inner world versus outer world, and how to navigate that.
Yeah, sure. So on the fundamental level, there is no inner world and external world. So take the idea of a projector. Okay. There's information running through the projector. And then from that information and the decoding process of the computer inside that projector, there's this projection that comes onto a screen. We live in the illusion that what's being projected on the screen is not the projector, and it is. The projection is the projector. The projection is coming from the information in the projector. So this idea that the material world and the spiritual world, or the internal world and the external world, are separate, they're absolutely not. They're one and the same. There is no such thing as separation. Now, on the level of understanding, to explain how to navigate through that, the question I would ask is, okay, great. We understand that they're not separate, but we do experience them as internal and external. So with that experience, how do we navigate through that experience? What connects the internal and the external world, so-called, there's one medium that bridges them two, and it's thought. So I can give you an example from certain information that I possess when it comes to extraterrestrial technology and how it operates, that may make this idea a little easier to understand. And before I get there, I'll preface with something. The internal, because of that idea of the projector, the internal is a reflection of the external, and therefore the external is a reflection of the internal. So if you don't know how to deal, or you're having trouble with dealing with your internal reality, then forget the internal reality. Focus on the external reality, because if you can change that, the internal will change. If you're, on the other hand, if you're having trouble focusing on the external reality, forget the external reality, focus on the internal reality, and the external will change. So for example, let's say your mind is cluttered. It's a mess. It's going crazy. You don't feel good. You feel like your body is toxic. You're sick. You have to fix it. Generally, people that are sick and internally disoriented, you'll see, for example, that their bedrooms are very messy. Always. It goes hand in hand, because the internal is a reflection of the external, and the external is a reflection of the internal. So if you don't know how to go about gaining that willpower to to do certain actions that would fix your internal, like maybe eating a different way or stopping to ingest and consume certain toxins, and that's too difficult for you, go fix your bedroom. It's really simple.
Mm-hmm.
You go fix your bedroom, open your drawer. Maybe it's a mess. Go organize it, because in and of itself, the action of reorganizing and cleaning the external will put you in a resonance and a frequency that will make it much easier for you to be in alignment with cleaning the internal. So that's how I would say to navigate, to always, if you can't figure out one, look at the other. If you can't figure out the other, look at the other one. That's the beauty of it, because they're not separate.
Yeah.
And it gives us all the resources that we need to make a shift. If it goes as deep as to the art that you paint, the art that's on your wall, maybe in your office, if you happen to spend a lot of time in your office or your bedroom, what's on your wall? What music are you listening to? All of these things affect your vibration. It affects your resonance, and therefore dictates how you're going to live your life.
Mm-hmm.
So listen to the music that resonates on the resonance that you want to be in. Put art on your wall that represents the way you want to live. Eat food, or only allow food. If you can't, a lot of us go into like the public domain in restaurants, and it's hard for us not to take French fries or a cheeseburger. And maybe it's hard to control, but I can tell you one thing, you can definitely control not buying it and bringing it into your own refrigerator.
Mm-hmm.
So if there's one thing that you do, forget about what happens in public when you go out. Start with your own home. Don't bring things into your home that you don't want to resonate with. You want to stop smoking? Smoke the cigarette outside when you're out to begin with. But don't smoke in your own home. You want to stop drinking? Get the alcohol out of your house, because your home is your zone. Where you spend the most time is your zone. And your zone is the external reality that makes your vibration of being ultimately. So that's the guidance I would give on how to navigate all of these things.
Yeah, I love it. And it's sort of that the information is always there somewhere, as long as you're paying attention to it.
Yes, absolutely.
Now, when people are, like, I'm thinking when you'd made the example with music. So for example, if someone's in a really low state, right, either depressed and then sometimes you resonate, or you're drawn to certain things that sometimes perpetuate that state. Is there like either sad music, or maybe if you're really angry about something and you put on music that's really sort of like aggressive, like hate metal or something along those lines, like, is there a place for that where you're still resonating with that until that changes, or is there something, where do people work with that when they're kind of drawn to some of these things that almost do resonate with the frequency that they're at that point, but they're actually needing to still try to move above it, or switch to another gear?
That's a very interesting question. I would say that the change begins with the awareness of how it works in the first place. That's why I always push the idea that awareness is so important. So the first question is, why would one like heavy metal in the first place? Because heavy metal has its own resonance. It's not about good or bad.
Yeah.
It's simply, there's an energy for this and an energy for this. What makes you feel good can make you feel good for two reasons. Either if it makes you feel comfortable, it's generally an indication that you're in resonance with it. If it makes you feel high, it's generally an indication that you're below its resonance and it's bringing you higher. So there is a place for things like heavy metal. There is a place for things like smoking and drinking and cheeseburgers. And the place for all of those things they act as great tools to measure your current vibration of being. So I'll give you a personal example. I used to live in New York City, have a great time with all my friends, go out, nightlife. We would drink just like everybody else. And for a while, the alcohol, like most people, made me feel loose and good and dancing and fun and high and great. And there came a point where, as I began working on myself, and not even saying that I didn't want to drink, forget that. As I began working on myself, as I started eating different foods that were of higher vibrations, raw fruits, raw vegetables, food that gets its food from the sun and rain, that's, by the way, light source. As I started doing that and shifting my vibration, I came to a point where the consumption of alcohol no longer made me feel good. It didn't bring me up anymore. It started now, if I take a sip of wine, I'll probably be in the bathroom for a few hours. I'll feel terrible and I'll want to go to sleep. So the indication is the alcohol is the control. It's the standard, because let's say tequila has its own frequency, right? And when you consume it, that frequency is the control or the indicator of where you're at. If it makes you feel good, you're below its vibration. If it brings you down, you're above its vibration. You can do the same. Now, that awareness allows you to use all of these things that people call bad as a good thing. Because number one, if you don't feel good doing it, you're not going to want to do it. But you first have to be aware of your current vibration and where you stand in order to change it, in order to raise it, in order to improve it. So ultimately, all of these things hold a place in changing ourselves, in improving ourselves. And the ultimate place where they do that is through their ability to give us indications of where we're at.
Yeah, I like that a lot too. It's just it just keeps coming back again to there has to be a desire to want to be aware of what's going on, to even ask the questions in the first place and to start to pay attention. So it's almost like if you want to create certain changes, you can't get around but have to be introspective and look at it at some point if you want things to change. I'm thinking for some people that feel like they're kind of stuck, and I sometimes I think around the point of awareness, if people get sometimes the idea that they can feel better with certain things that aren't necessarily helping them in the big picture long term, maybe. So this is like when we get caught up in things like alcohol or some of the things that, again, can have their place for stuff, but if we're not sort of paying attention to what the messages they're telling us, to me, I always think like if we know if something is assisting us at this point in time, then at least my guidance for it is always like, how is it making me feel? And how is my life feeling and looking? And what's going on in my life? So it's like, if things are feeling in a way that is beneficial for me, and if my world is shaping in a way that also feels like it is progressing in a positive direction, then I feel like I'm kind of on track. And if something is making me not feel so well, and I'm paying attention to that, and at the same point, I'm seeing the reflection of that showing up in my external world over and over and over again, that to me is an awareness that maybe then if I want a different result or I want to feel a different way, then I need to kind of take heed into what's going on and look into it a little bit more depth to figure out what kind of changes.
For sure. But with that, and also from personal experience, if you're not ready to make a change, don't do it.
Yeah.
You like that cigarette, smoke the hell out of it, enjoy.
Yeah.
But just know that the day will come where you're going to be over it. And that knowingness also has a resonance, also has a frequency. And eventually, the more you drill that into yourself, you just won't want it. The one thing I don't do is stop something that's not good for me, like vices, with resistance towards it.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? So like, for example, I've been a vegan for most of my life, but there was a point from like 14 to probably 19 years old where cheese, it was like a drug for me, addicting completely. I could eat a block of feta cheese on my own with nothing on it. And I loved it so much. But there came a point where every time I ate it, I would break out and it would make me feel bad. But I didn't want to stop. I'm like, no, I know this is bad for me. I know it's not doing me good at all. But I'm not stopping because I'm not ready to stop yet. But I know that there will come a point where I'm going to be ready to stop. And whenever that point comes, I'm in.
Yeah.
So I just let that happen instead of resisting and saying, I'm going to push this away. It's not good for me. Forget, I don't go according to that. I go according to use your power of thought, use your level of knowingness to change your vibration over time. Be patient with it and shift when you're ready to shift in flow and not resistance.
It's such an important part. It is such an important part because otherwise I think what happens is we end up creating a lot of judgment on ourselves for thinking that we need to be doing something better and that we're not good enough with where we are.
Yeah.
So and then it just keeps this cycle going. So I completely agree. I think like what happens is when you eventually get into that state of alignment, things just naturally shift. It's that different of trying to push the mountain, using your willpower to try and make something happen that you're not really totally on board with, versus
Exactly.
getting drawn up because that just feels like the natural direction that you're going to be moving in.
Exactly. Again, it's all different, like frequencies, dimensions. If stopping something exists here and you're not there and your willpower is here, you can push it all you want. You're not pushing anything because you're not in alignment with it. So that's why I say what I say and practice that as well.
Yeah, I like that. And it kind of opens up the door to the power of the thoughts and the power of our imagination. So even if you are in a certain state and you're wanting to change, there's no harm and there's a lot of benefit to actually start to think about, what could the world look like if I were doing this and this and this? What would it feel like? And you start to kind of create this picture of it. And I think in the process of just playing with the imagination on it, then we're in some ways, we're sort of already forming that world that we're wanting to move into ahead of time. Even while we're over here, we're sort of creating it. It's like building the house that we're going to move into at some point, even though we're over in this apartment right at the moment. And at some point that's going to be done and we're going to be there.
You know, when it comes to that thought and the power behind it, thought is thought is the link between the intangible and the tangible. Thought's the link between the internal and the external, or the spirit and the physical. That's what thought is. By the way, that's how, okay, I said that I would say this earlier. I'll share it now because it fits perfectly. When it comes to certain crafts, UFOs, if you want to call them, that are operated today, we see them moving in ways where, I mean, they're just against the laws of physics. You know, it's going 5,000 miles per hour in one direction, suddenly makes a 90-degree turn. Nobody understands how the ship is still intact and how the operator is still alive. It doesn't make sense. So I'm going to share something with you that I actually want to read you from here that I think you will like a lot. And it's all about the way that, one second. It's all about the way that these crafts move in the first place and how they work and what the power of thought truly is. Let me see where it is. Oh, it's right in the beginning. Okay. I'm going to read you a short excerpt of something that will give you a very in-depth idea of how these things work that I think you'll appreciate. There we go. Okay. This is from Rays of Knowledge. It's explaining the workings behind an extraterrestrial craft from firsthand experience. Okay. This thing is called the power of thought. When one is able to access this field of universal interconnectivity, the power of thought is the key component to be able to bring inanimate objects to life. The power of thought is what connects the spiritual world to the material world. As a matter of fact, the power of thought is what extraterrestrials use today to operate their crafts. The following is an excerpt of a paraphrased version of a conversation I had with George in regards to his firsthand experiences inside multiple extraterrestrial crafts. I didn't read this to anybody else yet, by the way.
First time.
This is the paraphrase version because it was a conversation that I remembered with him. The inside of an extraterrestrial craft does not look like what many may think. It is not like the inside of a Boeing 747 cockpit with thousands of buttons. Yes, there are buttons, but not so many. The crafts work through a combination of physical and spiritual technology. The physical technology consists of technology such as electromagnetic pulsation, electromagnetic laser pulsation, magnets, and energy from the sun. When I speak of spiritual technology, I am referring to the power of thought. The only thing in the entire universe that is faster than the speed of light and the speed of sound is thought. Inside every craft, there is a sort of dashboard, which is what the operator uses to operate the craft. This dashboard is what allows for the craft to become an extension of the operator's consciousness by connecting the physical to the spiritual. It looks like some sort of panel made of what looks to, this is George speaking, made of what looks to me as some type of glass or clear quartz, but I'm not sure what it is made of. To operate the craft, the operator places their hand on this glass looking panel and through the power of thought operates the craft. There is no steering wheel or gas like propulsion. It all works through consciousness. In order to operate such a craft, one must possess a very high level of awareness and consciousness. Since the craft becomes an extension of the operator's consciousness, in order to maneuver the craft in ways that transcend the limitations of time and space, which is what we see today, the consciousness of the operator must also transcend the limitations of time and space because the craft operates according to their consciousness. Have you ever wondered how the crafts that we have seen in more recent times, such as the ones filmed by Chad Underwood, a Navy pilot, can maneuver in ways and at speeds that are completely against the laws of physics as we know them today? Well, it is because these crafts are an extension of the operator's consciousness, which also transcends the laws of physics as we know them today. So the purpose of that is to show how thought is the connection between these two things that we think are separate and they're not. And everything, by the way, is alive, because alive is not just what's breathing, what can replicate itself. Alive is energy, and energy is consciousness. And when we have the awareness through the power of thought that we, all things and all beings, whether inanimate or animate, are connected energetically to this universal field of consciousness, when we understand that, navigating with the power of thought can make crafts move, can make pyramids fly, and can make us change our lives in a matter of seconds.
Well, and for people that need to kind of stretch a little bit, I mean, this stuff's been talked about in different ways. And some of my favorite books growing up that I would read were books by Richard Bach. You know, if you haven't read like Jonathan Livingston Seagull or some of these books, I mean, the story of Jonathan Livingston Seagull was this regular seagull that just knew there was more and would watch other birds fly, and eventually got to the point where they could like teleport and do all sorts of things. But it's this way of just watching this story kind of build out. Like it keeps stretching what we think is possible. And the reality is that if we don't think it's possible, we're not going to be able to get there. There's no space for it. And part of why I wanted to do this series is because I want people to just think outside of the box. Like, what if? I mean, one of our favorite exercises that my wife and I will do will be, well, what if this could happen? What if this? It's a really soft way of just opening up the door for things that maybe we have had struggles with believing because we've been held pretty tight around stuff. So it's sort of like, what if that could be possible? And everything you're saying to me makes sense, especially with the little bit that we're learning now from even things around quantum physics. That's the only way things are going to have to start to shift. So much of it comes down to frequency, vibration, light, intent, thought. I mean, these are going to be the languages of the future. They have to be. Mm-hmm. And my question for people at this point, or for you, is in order for thought to be really profound, to be able to do something like this, there has to be absolute certainty. Their doubt is gone. They cannot be functioning from a place of fear, because I feel like when we get into this world of manifestation, and belief plays such a big part of it. And a lot of times when we are thinking things, we want something to happen. If we're not totally on board with believing that it's actually possible, or there's doubt that it's going to happen, or there's a lot of fear wrapped around it, then we can't really get there. So how do we start to work with doubt and fear so that we can really kind of supercharge our thought process around these things?
Okay, I'm going to give you an answer that you're probably not going to expect. From what I've learned, and this is something that I've especially it's been drilled into my head over the past month, writing this Rays of Knowledge through reading excerpts from Rays of Light. There's a very important teaching in there that I bring into Rays of Knowledge as well. And I'm going to try to express it because I've only written it down. I've never spoken it out loud yet. We think on the collective level, if you were to ask the average person, what do you need to do in order to receive spiritual abundance, in order to receive these high levels of understanding? And the common answer would probably be nonstop learning, studying, meditation, prayer, all of these things of spiritual significance that we associate with it. And what Rays of Light teaches that I found to be absolutely incredible is that in order to receive spiritual abundance, when I say spiritual abundance, I mean higher levels of awareness and all of that, it doesn't start with spiritual actions. It doesn't start with any of that. It starts with the level of the body. So it breaks down the human being into 4 parts: the body, the mind, the spirit, and the soul. The body is the body. The mind is the operating mechanism that makes the body work. The spirit is the identified portion of the soul. That means that the spirit is Jason. The soul has nothing to do with Jason. The soul is just unidentified energy. So those are the different levels. And we generally think that in order to receive the spiritual abundance, we have to open the doors on the level of the soul to receive it and to understand it. And what in this case, so Rays of Light is a part of it is a dialogue between George and one of his teachers who happened to be a rabbi in this case. He's referred to as Rabbi AA. Mm-hmm. And Rabbi AA explains, and by the way, this has nothing to do with religion or anything like that. He just happens to be a rabbi. He explains the fact that in order to reach level 2, 3, and 4, the mind, spirit, and the body, all of those are affected by level 1, which is the body. I'm sorry, the mind, spirit, and the soul. All of those are affected by the root. And the root that they all have in common is the body. So it's not enough just to understand what we're talking about conceptually and have willpower and have thought. With that, the body has to be in a state of purity, and it has to be prepared to be able to elevate to those new levels in the first place. So it all starts with the body. So there comes in the idea now of food. What is food? Why do we need to eat? What's the mysticism behind eating in the first place? And he goes on by explaining how in order to bring something into the physical world, there must be a physical instrument in order to bring that into the physical world. So, for example, the food of the soul is not the food of the body. It's 2 different types of nourishment. They're satisfied and fulfilled from 2 different types of things. One is tangible, one is not. In order to bring physical spiritual abundance, we must do so through physical means to bring it to the body. And that's where food comes in. So what is food? Food is an expression of light. It's an expression of energy. Each food holds its own vibration, holds its own frequency. And we've come to a point today where we call certain things food that aren't. So high vibrational food is what's referred to as food that gets its energy and its nutrients from the sun and the rain. Food is just like thought is the link that connects the physical to the spiritual. Food is what connects us to source. Now, not to say that source is external, but food is high source energy. It's high vibrational energy. Mm-hmm. And when we consume that, it helps us prepare the physical body to be able to open up the doors. So the power of thought doesn't just work conceptually, but it works through experience as well. And the power and significance of the body, food, and the process of eating is, I would say, the root to all of this when it comes to raising your level of awareness and vibration.
So basically, in some ways, it's sort of an act of self-love in a lot of ways too, when you just start to care for your body.
Yeah. Ultimately, again, there's this, and it's just conceptually, what is it when we say your body? You know, ultimately, it's like saying that wave in the ocean, but we know that a wave in the ocean is just energy being expressed through the medium of water. So there is no such thing as individual waves. That's also an illusion. We think that it's an individual wave, but it's the same energy flowing through the same medium, expressed differently. So the way that translates is one expression is Jason, another expression is Jay, another expression is Lori, another expression is Manny. All of these things are different expressions, but they're all coming from the same place. They're all coming from the same energy being expressed through the same medium, only expressed a little bit differently. And that's the illusion, which is why the awareness is so important, to understand that my body is no different than your body, because we're working in the same bowl, we're working in the same soup, and when I raise my individual vibration, my individual level of awareness, mine, I'll call it, what it's doing is, in the ocean, for example, it would affect every wave around it. And eventually, when enough individual waves increase their individual level of awareness, that's what shifts the collective. That's what changes the current in the ocean.
Yeah, every drop raises the level of the sea. That's kind of the idea.
Absolutely.
And so then from a food perspective, it would basically be, just to kind of spell it out for people, it's like, I mean, if you want to start right from the beginning, easiest thing would be start just getting rid of total junk foods. Stop eating fast foods, stop eating some of the stuff, at the point where that starts to resonate with you. And if that's something that, and I remember, like, even in my own movement through this, and I mean, I'm in practice as a naturopathic doctor, and so it's like I'm aware of a lot of this stuff around food. But I remember where there was a point where, kind of like you when you were talking about with alcohol and stuff, it's like there was a point where I enjoyed going to like McDonald's or some of the different fast food things when I was a kid. I mean, that was a fun part of my growing up at that point in time. And there just became a point where literally the thought of it can actually even bring on like a physical nausea, right? And
Yeah.
and if we listen to some of those things and then sort of just pay attention to the body again, like what does it feel like when you have, so we ended up creating our own garden stuff quite years back, and it's like that is an incredibly nourishing part of our life, to be able to plant your own food, to go pick your own food with our kids, play in the dirt, pick lettuce and then make a salad for yourself right there. I mean, there's sort of like stages that you can move to, but I'd say, initially first things would be if you can start to avoid processed, pre-packed, sort of dead food. Vibrational quotient on that's very low. There's no real energy to it. It's just calories. There's no real energy from it. And start to incorporate more plant foods, more plant-based nutrition. That stuff is going to start to, and then what happens is, just like you said, you will change. It's like sometimes when I see people for, say, concerns that they might be struggling with around mental health, whether it's depression or anxiety or even things like schizophrenia, these types of things, a lot of it can start with just working with the body.
Mhm.
A lot of that just there. A lot of times you can change stuff with diet and nutrition, and all of a sudden it's like things lift. They start to feel different. Now, there can be lots of aspects to all of that, but I totally get what you mean by starting with the body. And it's a doable place for a lot of people to begin the process.
It's doable. It really is. My rule of thumb when it comes to food is the higher water content ratio inherently in the food, the higher vibrational it is, the less dense it is, aka the higher vibrational it is.
Yep.
So a cucumber, I think, is like 99.7% water, whereas bread or meat is probably 70% water, like the human body. Especially after you cook it, it's probably below 30. I don't know. I'm not sure. I would assume. So also cooked foods, by the way, that's why raw food, I think, stops at 118 degrees, if I'm not mistaken. Anything above that temperature starts destructuring the water. And by the way, we are 70% water in the human body. So whatever affects water affects you. Just like the moon, people are like, the moon can't affect you. Of course it can. The moon affects high tide and low tide. What do you think it does to you?
Well, and like you said, we're 70% water, just like the Earth's surface is 70% water. But what's really fascinating about water too is that because water molecules are such a small molecule, if you were to actually add up the number of molecules, it actually makes up close to 99% of the human body just by molecules. because they're so small. So I was just reading a book called The Fourth Phase of Water, and there's actually a lot of magical stuff about water that I think is going to come out more and more. I mean, there's so much we don't know about water that we are learning about water. I mean, water carries information in many ways. And so what we're going to find out is, I think, as more and more is done, at least in a way that outside of sort of intuitively understanding things, I think people will start to get certain descriptions that will make sense to them as far as what's actually going on. Sometimes science can catch up with some of the things that are going on, but water is one of those fascinating ones. Now,
When you said, just one last thing, when you said water carries information, it's like we all need these studies to prove that. I
mhm,
mean, we know it. Of
I
course,
know.
it carries information. If we have a water turbine create energy, that's proof that water carries energy, and we found a way to like take the energy out of the water and use it for our own benefit, whatever we're trying to power. So energy is information, energy is data. That's what it is. If something can hold energy, inherently it holds information. So
Right. Well,
science
and
science is a little behind with what they're doing because
well,
there's physicality.
science is always behind what's going on, but it's sort of it's like the litmus test that most people need to before they can start to believe something. And I think part of this series is what I'm wanting people to do is start to believe it before you see it, so that you can actually move closer towards it. But yeah, with water, they're looking at this exclusion zone water, which actually carries this electrical potential that can literally create energy in the body. And this exclusion zone water will be more in some of these higher fruits and vegetables that are high water content. And I'll tell you more about it after if you want, but it's you probably find
Sure.
it pretty interesting. But yeah, it's a real thing, and they're actually, it's at the beginning stages of that. But my gut tells me there's going to be a lot coming out around that, and how powerful clean water is, and why it's so important to have clean, healthy exclusion zone water. It's basically will upregulate your ATP and your energy. It's like a free energy source.
You said something very, it was one, two, three, four, five. It was 6 words. I wrote them down as you said it. You said believe it before you see it.
Mhm.
That's the most important thing I would say anywhere right now, because so many people are asking for proof. So many people want to see, so many people are saying, okay, show it to me. And my question is always, well, one second, let me ask you a question. Is there really such thing as indefinite proof? Because a picture might be enough for somebody, a video might be enough for another, physical experience might be enough for somebody, and there are other people where all of what I just said is still not enough.
Mhm.
So what do you mean proof? What does that really mean? I've thought about that topic for a while on what do we think about that? How does that work? And there's an excerpt in the Pyramid Code that talks about the idea of 12 stars, 144 stars within the zodiac that are not able to be seen, and they're not able to be seen because they exist in the fifth dimension. Therefore, we will only be able to see them when we reach fifth dimensional awareness, because you
Mhm.
can't be aware of something if you're not aware of the dimension that it exists in. So when it comes to proof, we keep saying we want to see, we want to see, we want to see. And if we're not ready to receive something, in other words, that translates to if we're not ready, or we're not prepared, or we're not in resonance with a frequency that proof exists on, then you can give me the proof and I won't understand why it's proof. So people say seeing is believing. My question is it? Is it really? Because what are you seeing? What is your perception in the first place? Perception is dictated by the limitations of your awareness.
Mhm.
As you raise and extend that range of awareness, what you see is completely different. You can see more.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
believe it before you see it. I agree with you.
Yeah, I like
That,
that.
that
Well,
belief in and of itself brings you to the ability to see it.
Well, do you remember that story? I remember hearing the story. It was either with Christopher Columbus or Marco Polo, and they had kind of pulled in with their three ships, and it was I can't remember where exactly they were, but the the native population that was there had never seen boats like that. So they were sitting out there in the horizon and no one could see them until the shaman kept sitting out there and just staring out into the ocean because they knew something was there. And eventually it actually came into vision where they were able to see it, but they weren't able to see it because they had no concept of that for their preconditioned experiences. So it wasn't even able to actually recognize what it was. But the shaman who was able to kind of tap into some higher states of consciousness was able to actually materialize it because now they could see it. And then when they could see it, it started to open up the door for other people to start to see it.
Absolutely.
But
Yep.
I feel like we all have to start to be like that shaman to be able to be open to seeing something that we've never experienced before.
Mhm. Absolutely.
Now, another thing you talk about in the book too that I think is really important and is the concept of intuition and the importance of connecting to that intuition. This is something that has been a big part of our life. My wife and I, probably over the last few years, has been, I mean, I was brought up very much of like, and this is almost like when we talk about proof, it segues nice from proof, because in many ways, for a long time, my proof needed to be in certain studies, it needed to be in certain science and certain things along those lines for me to kind of believe it. And I felt like I had been disconnected from my intuition for quite a while, or I would feel it, but I wouldn't totally trust it unless I could validate it. And what has invalidated in the way that I believed I needed to have it validated in. And I know, well, probably about 10 years back and on, it's been a bigger and bigger movement towards really connecting to that sense of intuition, that inner knowing that I think we are all capable of, but we have been sort of this, we've been kind of pulled away from trusting it. And so how do we start to re-trust our intuition again? And where is intuition and where is the role of things like reason? And when can reason actually be a hindrance to our ability to connect to intuition and to our internal truth?
Awesome. Okay, so you introduced it well. There's intuition and there's reason. Intuition is that internal knowingness. It's just what it is. You know, it's, by the way, it's very much in alignment with instinct.
Mhm.
It's an intuitive thing. It's an instinctual thing. When you, for example, the zebra, and Bruce Lipton brings this up, Dr. Bruce Lipton says, well, why is the zebra, how does it know that the lion wants to eat him? And they know that from birth. It's not something that they had to see done. There is an instinct that was built into them that I would even call an intuition, which in other words is the universe acting through a being. That's what instinct and intuition in my experience are. Reason, on the other hand, is something that hinders us, not in and of itself, but if we allow reason to guide us, we're guiding ourselves with inherent limitations. Because intuition is not limited, it's limitless. It's something that many of us probably can't even comprehend, because comprehension is through the mind. Intuition is not. Intuition is something that's felt. It's not something that's thought about. It's for example, if you ask me what's 99.3 divided by 7.5, reason, logic, or if I don't have a calculator, I probably have to do some very long form of long division to figure it out. And maybe in like 2 minutes, I'll be able to tell you what the answer is. Intuition, a number would pop into my head and I'll give you the answer. That's being in tune. That's where it comes from. So, oh, and you know, I just thought of something else as I'm saying it out loud. Intuition is really being in tune with a specific resonance of what's going on. That's how you're able to perceive it so quickly instead of thinking about what it would be if and when and how and why. So reason holds a very important role so long as intuition is your guide.
Mhm.
You let your intuitive nature guide you, you let your feeling guide you, and after the feeling guides you, then you can think about it. Then you could say, okay, well, this feels right. Now, what do I think about it? You know, and sometimes that thought can limit you from doing something. Sometimes it can help you, because thinking is okay. It's not a bad thing to operate through the mind. The mind holds certain purposes. But again, the mind is limited to a certain extent. We're limited to our awareness and our comprehension on understanding how things work. Intuition, again, is limitless. So you let the limitless guide you. You can use the reason to help understand what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
And in that way, there's still probably limitations, but they're less than they would have been if it was reversed. And you let the reason guide you and the intuition not really do much because the reason already corrupted your lens and your view of what you're doing.
Well, and I love that because I feel like most people, and we are taught almost the opposite. Like
Yeah.
in many ways, we are taught that, even, oh, you're being overly emotional or you're being so. In many ways, emotions and what we're feeling is very discounted as being sort of um, not a very logical way of doing things. And logic has so much value in today's society. And I completely think that this is the way that things need to start to shift. First, get an intuition around stuff. And in my mind, it's like reason can be really beneficial if it is exactly like you said, guided by the intuition of the gut and the heart centers where the intent comes from. And then I think reason can be a really valuable tool. But without it, we can also be led down the garden path really easily if we're not following the intuition, the gut instinct. Reason can completely cloud people's minds, and we can manipulate reason and logic and I think a lot of times that's where there's been a bit of a disconnect with people's feeling sense because we've given so much value to and also given value that we only will know the truth outside of ourselves. So much now it's like, you need to go to an expert to hear what's right and what's right, what's wrong, what works, what doesn't work, regardless of people almost abandoning their sense of what that actually feels like for themselves. So
Reason is the reason we need nutritionists. Reason, I give an example in Forming the Formless. I said, take a hungry human baby and put a rabbit and an apple in front of it. What's it going to do? It's going to play with the rabbit. It's going to eat the apple. Take a hungry baby lion and put a rabbit and an apple in front of it. What's it going to do? It's going to eat the rabbit and play with the apple. Why? Because that's instinct. So reason, when it comes to science especially, we need studies upon studies upon studies to show us why an apple is good for you. And it's like, why do you need to spend money on studying that? There's nothing to study. It's intuitive, it's instinctual, and you don't need reason to guide you. Reason makes things take longer and can also take us completely off track from what the truth is to make it the exact opposite. So definitely let the intuition guide. Come back in touch with your instincts. That could be by eating certain foods. That's also hand in hand with reaching a higher level of awareness. And let the reason come second, not first.
and now we've talked a lot about, I know we're on time here pretty soon too, so I'll be aware of that. But we've talked a lot about consciousness as well. And just for people that are still trying to grasp what we mean by that, and even when we talk about a higher state of consciousness or a lower state of consciousness, can you just explain what we mean by that and what some examples of that might be like for people that are wanting to maybe move towards certain value that's in some of the higher states of consciousness? What is the value with some of the higher states of consciousness?
Yeah. So before that, I want to give a quick little teaching that was given to me to understand the different levels in the first place. Before we understand, to make people aware of how they work according to what I was taught. There's 10 dimensions. There's an extra one, but we won't talk about that for now. There's 10 different dimensions. I was given the honor of knowing the name of the first 5 when they talk of dimensions. Now, the names are what we refer to today in science as brainwave patterns, brainwave frequencies. So in order from 1 to 5, which are the ones that I know, it's exactly what we know: beta, alpha, theta, delta, gamma. 5th dimensional awareness is being in a state of gamma. Now, what science doesn't teach you, and maybe because they only study physical phenomenon instead of anything beyond that, What I was taught is each dimension is broken up into 10 different parts. So there's beta 1, beta 2, beta 3, beta 4. There's theta 1, 2, 7, 9, gamma 1, 2, whatever. And each dimension has its own attributes to it, what you're able to do, what exists there. So, for example, things like in order to do something like levitation, flight with the body, you have to be in a state of gamma. I don't know exactly what number, but probably a gamma 5, gamma 6, gamma 7. You have to be in resonance with that, at the minimum, that dimension and that part of that dimension. Most of humanity is in beta right now. So in order to make that shift, beta is more attributed to physical things. So, a very materialistic lifestyle, being upset if you get a ring that's 20 carats instead of 30 carats. I don't know, things like that, where it's you give a lot of weight to the physical and material aspects of life. You forget the idea and the awareness that we are a lot more than physical beings. So in beta, for example, you'll generally find people, not generally, you'll always find people thinking it's not possible to levitate. It's not possible to shift the form of your body. Shape-shifting is from the movies, none of that is possible. As you go higher and higher and higher, you're able to do different things. So let's say, for example, maybe alpha 7, I don't know if that's the exact one, but let's say alpha 7 or theta 5, you can see the energetic field around human bodies. You can see a person's aura. As you go higher, you may be able to see colors, whereas before you were only able to see light. And again, as you go higher, you experience different things. So by the way, this is just a fun little thing in regards to what we're talking about. When I said that, let's not talk about the other dimension. The other dimension is known as Dimension X. Dimension X is where shapeshifters operate. So that means, by the way, there's this idea of, and this is a little off topic, but there's this idea of how there's these evil races and reptilians and all of that. I personally don't know of any of that. I don't know anybody that's experienced that. And I do know of people that have experienced many different races physically. I'm not talking about channeling. So I'm not saying it's not possible, but I don't know of any of that. Also, if you want to take reason now, after the intuitive part, we've never really had an attack from any invaders with extraterrestrials or UFOs. And from what I see, we label things like abductions as abductions when anybody that's ever been abducted was not abducted. They were just taken up and they felt a lot of love. It wasn't a bad experience for anybody that I've heard of or seen giving their experience. So there's this idea that shapeshifters are these like evil people. And I can tell you for a fact that that's not true. Maybe there are some that use their power for not good purposes, but shapeshifters in and of themselves, number one, they're not a different race. They're human beings that have the ability to shapeshift. One of them I know work in TLS. I know a few others as well. They're not bad people. As a matter of fact, they're very good people that use their power and their abilities for very good things. They're not human beings. They're human beings that were born with the ability to do something. And Dimension X is this dimension that they, for whatever reason, have access to that gives them the ability to shift certain frequencies and energies in a way that can shift their physical form. Because ultimately our physical form is physical. It's not something that's like, because people think, what do you mean? You could shift from a human being to a dog or a human being into another human being. And if you think about it energetically and really scientifically, what's the difference between me and you, Jay? Nothing. There is no difference on the molecular level of how we're built. There might be a difference in how our DNA is built, but it's all built of those 4 parts of DNA. It's just situated differently. So technically, if I have the ability to change the sequence of my DNA and therefore shift my energy, I can look like you. I could talk like you. I could speak like you. The only difference is I would still have my consciousness in me, knowing that it's me. But everybody would think I'm you. And they have the ability to do that, by the way. So shape-shifting happens in Dimension X. The other 10 dimensions are just important to be aware of. I don't know the names of anything above gamma, but I do know that fifth dimensional awareness is what gamma is.
Gamma.
Ultimately, that's why, for example, in the pyramid code, it said these stars in the zodiac, those 144 stars, exist in gamma. You will only be able to see it if you reach, I think it said the upper limits of gamma or higher. That's what they're in resonance with. That's what you'll be able to see when you're there.
Mm-hmm.
In order to shift, again, there's many different ways. If you want to deal with it internally, it's first the awareness that our foods, our thoughts, our words, which are a reflection of our thoughts, they all hold a certain vibration. They all hold a certain resonance. What we speak, we become. What we eat, we become. The people we spend time with, we become. The music we listen to, we become. The art we paint and look at, we become. It's all reflections of everything else, and ultimately it's all one. So you shift everything else, wherever you have the power to do, internally or externally, to higher states of being. So again, first comes the awareness.
Yeah.
Second comes the knowledge of, okay, well, how do I do that? So a quick example is in the language of energy when it comes to words. I gave certain examples of how to formulate sentences. If you can't change your thoughts, at least change the words, which will eventually help shift the thought. So, for example, if you're sick and you don't want to be sick, you can say, I don't want to be sick. But that doesn't help much because the universe energetically focuses on the subject that you're speaking of. So forget the fact that you said, I don't want to. You said sick. That's the resonance that's coming. You might mean you want to be healthy, but you said sick. And that in and of itself is a vibration. It's a frequency that you become. So beyond that, you don't say, I don't want to be something. Mm-hmm. I do want to be something. So now we fix the idea of, okay, we're no longer focusing on sickness. We'll focus on health. Now we say, I want to be healthy. Well, there's another part with that sentence that's not in alignment with the resonance that you're asking for. The word want. If you want something, you always keep wanting it because that's the resonance, the vibration that you're bringing upon yourself. So now we take want out of it. What's next? Maybe I will be healthy? No, because you're keeping it a step ahead of you now. Mm-hmm. You're keeping it in the illusion of time in the future. What about I am healthy? I am healthy brings everything into the only moment that exists, which is the present moment. It brings that reality that's always existed into right here, right now. And it brings health, which is your focus. So the universe doesn't hear the word not. You can't say not. That it's the subject that you're focusing on. Your intention is not enough. Your intention is a very big part of it. But it has to be your intention coupled with your belief, coupled with your expression of what you want. Mm-hmm. By bringing it into here and right now, acknowledging that you already have it.
Yeah, it's that power of the I am presence. It's like that is what brings everything into reality right at this point in time.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Jason, can you tell us a little bit about your new book? When is this new book, Rays of Light, going to be coming out? I know you've just finished it, and so when are we going to be able to get access to it?
Okay, so yeah, it takes some time. I'm working on getting some publishers. By the way, Dr. Christiane Northrup is helping me.
Oh, good.
Before she's writing the foreword to this book, which I'm very excited for. I really love her energy. I appreciate her energy, and the fact that I can have her energy as a part of the system of this book is something that I have a lot of gratitude for that one. So
yeah, she's amazing.
Yeah, she's awesome. She's somebody I really admire. So when, it really depends on how the process usually goes. My first book, which went through more of a self-publishing, it took like 8 months, even after it was finished, because it takes some time with like page design and all that. The second book I did a little bit quicker. I think it was about 4 months. This one, I hope to do it as soon as possible, but ultimately it's up to the publisher that I go with and how they work and all that.
Yeah.
What I'm going to do regardless is on my Patreon that I'm opening like right now. again, I told you I really want to start an initiative of bringing us together in order to start funding other projects, other initiatives, and maybe shows. There are things regarding an academy in the works that's being worked on right now. Movies, documentaries, films, conscious content that has to be out there to help people and to help all of us. It's us, like ultimately. So part of what I'm going to be doing on the Patreon page is I'm going to be releasing certain things, certain excerpts from Rays of Knowledge that's exclusive to that community. And the intention that I want to build in the community is we all come together, we all bring our energy together. Patreon is something that's a monthly subscription. And my intention, my goal is to use those funds to be able to fund bigger projects in the future that will benefit all of us.
Awesome. I love it. I think that sounds great.
Yeah.
And again, we'll get all of those links on there so that people can check that out.
Cool.
And last question, Jason, is from your perspective, what is next phase of humanity going to look like? And what is the most important thing that we can do individually at this point in time?
That's a good one. I think that it might get a little bit on the surface. Things might be a little difficult. Things might be a little hard. We might experience some hardships on the way. Ultimately, again, the law of balance in the universe teaches us that in and of itself means we're going to slingshot very high. I personally don't think we've reached rock bottom yet. I think the indication of reaching rock bottom, which is not a bad thing, because that is what causes change. That's what induces change and a big shift in the first place. We'll know when we made a shift, when this community of opening your eyes and being a little bit more aware of what's going on grows to maybe not the majority, but a larger minority. I don't know what's going to happen in the near future. A lot of people think I do. I don't. I have ideas of certain things. Not all of them am I allowed to share. But I could tell you one thing for sure. We're headed in a beautiful direction. We're headed to a beautiful place. And on the way, if some things happen that may not be too comfortable, appreciate those things, because those things are what's going to bring us to exactly where we got to go. Waking up is not always a comfortable process. It's when somebody's in a deep sleep, you try waking them up and seeing what happens. They don't want to talk to you. They want to be in the world that they're in. My motivation, my goal is to facilitate that process of waking up through knowledge, through education, through awareness, to make it comfortable, or at least more comfortable, through compassion, through love, through all of those things of higher vibrational realities, where we can do this in a way that will just facilitate the process for everybody.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's beautiful. And I think right now, as crazy as it does get, and as much as people feel divided, to me, I feel like one of the most important things that we can do individually is care for ourselves, do the best we can to kind of know that I think ultimately everybody does the best they can with where we are. And we can always keep trying to be kind to ourselves and kind to others as much as we can.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Jason, that was wonderful. And I know I've probably got another couple pages of stuff that we could go through again, but maybe we'll do this again once your book's out, and we'll pull all of that information together and share it with everybody too. So where can we send people right now? Where are the best places where people can learn about you, where they can get your books, they can learn about the different work you're doing?
Sure. I have a YouTube channel. I have an Instagram profile, my website. There are a lot of things on there. By the way, there is a monthly meditation, monthly global meditation that I do with Lori Ladd, who's a dear friend of mine. We do it every repeating number of the month, so 12, 12, 1, 1, 2, 2, 3, 3, and so on. So we have a Facebook event that will be open always, and it will just keep growing and growing and growing, that we just change the dates and times every single month. In regards to learning more about what's going on, and if anybody has questions, you can reach out to me. I can do my best to answer, but I can't promise, just because I get a lot of messages. But YouTube, just my name, Jason Shurka. Instagram, my name, Jason Shurka. And my website is jasonshurka.com. And my Patreon is being opened right now. It looks like I'm going to be naming this community the Portal of Divine Knowledge, where we share all of this information. And again, you can just find it with my name as well, Jason Shurka.
Awesome. We'll put all of them in the show notes. Jason, what a pleasure. Thank you so much for your time and for all of your wisdom.
Thank you very much.
Well, that was awesome. Thank you so much for taking the time to invest in your health and well-being. Since this podcast is brand new, reviews and subscribers are so vital for us to get off the ground and share this really important information. So if you found this information valuable, please post a review and subscribe to the podcast so you'll get our newest episodes. Also, if you know of someone who would benefit from this, please share it with them. You can also find us on Instagram at #InspireHealthPodcast. If you have a question that you'd like to be addressed, direct message me on Instagram or leave a comment on one of my posts. I would love to hear from you. And you can grab our show notes and free resources for each episode at inspirehealthpodcast.com. So be sure to go online and check it out.